Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Book Club. We are still making our way through The Matriarch by Tina Knowles. I want to say that I got through a lot of chapters today. We're going to go over chapters 22 through 30. And chapter 22 takes place in spring of 1990. Chapter 30 is taking place of summer of 1997. So we're finna watch Beyonce and them grow up right quick. In my defense, this book is like 500 fucking pages long. It's like reading a Harry Potter book. Worth it. I'm not complaining in the slightest. But I saw comments yesterday like, oh my God, what's taking you so long to read this book? This book is literally over 500 pages. So, I mean, with that being said, wait, are you also live on YouTube? I'm not also live on YouTube. I'm recording for YouTube. I'm live on TikTok for my YouTube video. So if you see me interacting with the comments, we're gonna kill two birds with one stone here. So chapter 22 is called Lessons in Survival. It takes place in spring of 1990. So basically two ladies approach Beyonce. Last night we left off at Beyonce's dance teacher, Miss Starlet, finding out that she can fucking sing. And again, we know that Miss Tina comes from a musically inclined family. So it was like they all can sing. So she didn't realize how well Beyonce could sing because Beyonce had never just sung solo. Like they're always singing together, like as a family. So she starts doing the pageant circuit in Houston, kind of like a toddlers and tiaras type tea, but she's not actually competing in the beauty part. She's only doing the singing part, and she gets her little clout up. And from that, two ladies approach B about joining a group that they've developed called Girls Time. Now, when Beyonce joined the group, it was already established. There were already girls in the group, and Miss Tina talks about how she fell right into place, and she just fit right in. And she saw her very shy daughter, who used to not fucking talk to anybody, all of a sudden she was helping girls, she was directing girls, she was helping girls harmonize, she was teaching girls dance moves. Like she was very much in her element in this state of performance. And so from this, she ends up losing her voice. Like her voice goes hoarse. Now, when the two women approached Beyonce about being in Girls Time, Beyonce was put on lead vocals, right? In addition to this, Miss Tina and Matthew had Beyonce in vocal lessons, which Miss Tina states that Beyonce hated them. She did not like the vocal lessons. And so she didn't keep up with them, and they didn't make her. But when her voice was going hoarse, she ended up losing her vocals to another girl in the group named Ashley. Now, Beyonce was pissed because she was like, Mom, I'm sore. My voice is hoarse because they have me teaching the girls the harmonies. Like, nobody wants to fucking work anymore. Like, nobody wants to get off their ass and work. I'm doing all of the work. Like, I'm teaching the harmonies. I'm teaching the dance moves. I'm singing the solos. I'm now sore and you're going to take away my solo? What the fuck? Mom, say something. And so Miss Tina is conflicted because we do know she grew up feeling like her mother didn't stand up for her. But she wants Beyonce to learn this lesson. As we know, Miss Tina is very good at allowing the girls to learn certain lessons. So what she says is she said, okay, maybe, but I think that first you should continue with your voice lessons. I know you hated them, but the reason you lost your solo was because your voice is hoarse. And if you trained your voice correctly, then you wouldn't go hoarse. You would know how to sing and help everyone and still have the voice that you need to have for the solos. So Beyonce is like, at first, no. She gets irritated. She's like, what the fuck, Mom? I hate you. And she literally talks about this. She talks about the fact that Beyonce was like, literally, I hate you. And she was like, ooh, that hurt. But you know what? I'm just going to let you sit in that. So Beyonce then comes back and is like, sorry, Mom. I just was really stressed out. I just was like, oh my God, I'm just so passionate about my art. And she's like, okay, I'll take the voice lessons. So she takes the voice lessons. She continues to play the background. And eventually, once she strengthens her voice and she learns how to properly sing, what immediately happens? She gets her solos back. Now, the other part of this lesson was that Beyonce was trying to fake away beef with Ashley because Ashley was the girl that they gave the solos to instead of Beyonce since she was hoarse. How old is Beyonce here? She is 1990. She's 9. So she's a little girl, and Ashley's a few years older than her. I think they said Ashley was like 12. Now, Miss Tina wants. Also, part of the reason Miss Tina wants to teach Beyonce this lesson is because she doesn't want Beyonce beefing with Ashley. You know what I'm saying? Like, she's like, no, she didn't do anything to you. Like, it's not her fault that you're whores. You know what I'm saying? And they said, hey, can you do this? And so she really wants to hammer home that just focus on yourself. Don't focus on nobody else, what no one else has going on. And this is where we get the kind of mantra of this book: focus on yourself, work hard. You are your only competition. And in the song Survivor, Destiny's Child, wishing you the best, pray that you are blessed, da 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 da. I'm better than that. And like they go on to like name all these reasons why they are survivors and how they're their own competition, and then you see the end. Because my mama taught me better than that. That verse and that bar comes directly from this lesson. Beyonce has talked about how basically this is something that has stuck with her for the rest of her life, and I think that's very evident in how we see how Beyonce moves when it comes to like other artists, not only her peers, but other up and coming artists throughout the years, in terms of how you never see Beyonce beefing with other bitches. You always see Beyonce just simply focusing on herself. And this comes from this exact lesson of Miss Tina making her be like, take the voice lessons, train your voice. You don't need to beef with Ashley, you're beefing not with her. Just focus on what the fuck you got going on. Let me tell you something. Miss Tina be teaching me, like, I've been reading this book and I've been getting the wisdom poured on me, child. This lady is wise. She got that Creole voodoo, hoodoo, woo-woo, woo-woo on her. Like, this lady is smart as fuck. Like, oh my God. Okay. That's why Nikki's mad, child. Okay, you said it, not me. Someone in the comments said that. That's not me. I'm just reading the comments, child. Okay, so now, in addition to this, so if we're going back to yesterday's video, Uncle Johnny's boyfriend, who is Peanut. Peanut is very ingratiated into the family because him and Johnny have been together. They got together in the early 80s. It's now 1990. So they've definitely been together over 5 years, probably more like 7. Tina goes on to say that they are married in every way but paper because, as we know, this point in time, gay marriage is not legal. Peanut is diagnosed with breast cancer. Now, we know in the year of our Lord 2025 that men can get breast cancer. But in the 80s and the early 90s, what was happening to gay men that was making them incredibly sickly? The HIV and AIDS epidemic was happening. And so when Johnny and Peanut are over at Tina's house one day, a friend, like someone that they both knew, she said Johnny had made this woman's wedding dress, so it was someone that they both knew. Peanut is sitting there and Tina's like passing out glasses or something along those lines, and the lady's like, what's wrong with you? And she's very rude to Peanut, and it's like, it puts Miss Tina off bad. Basically, she pulls Tina to the side. She's saying, why are you letting him eat off of your dishes? Because that was, me and Jamila talked about this on the podcast last week, because Jamila's uncle, her mom's brother actually died of AIDS and HIV complications in the 80s. And that was something that she talked about, like her grandmother did when he was so sick and he had to go back home and live with her grandmother, is that he had his own set of silverware. He had his own set of cup and plate and stuff, because in the 80s, like, we were not educated on what this was for real. And the government did not, Ronald Reagan and them did not give a fuck. The things that we know about HIV and AIDS come directly from people on the ground, crowdfunding, raising money to find out what this was and like how to combat and fight it. But at the time, it was very common. Like, you don't drink off of people who have this, you don't eat off of them, like you can get it, like all this ignorant shit, right? So that definitely comes up. And Miss Tina basically alludes to the fact that she never spoke to that woman again because of how she treated Peanut in her house. So now we are at some point in 1990, Peanut dies. Unfortunately, he passes away. He succumbs to breast cancer. It took him very quickly, is what Miss Tina describes. And again, this was a loss for their family because Peanut has been around since the early 80s. And Uncle Johnny, she describes Johnny to be a one fella guy. So, and we also know that Peanut's family did not fuck with Peanut. Unfortunately, like a lot of families at this point in time, when you were gay, LGBTQ plus IA, it was not uncommon to be shunned by your family, and Peanut was shunned by his. Now this is where it gets nasty. Peanut's family did not fuck with him, did not speak to him at all, and yet and still, obviously, since Uncle Johnny did not have any legal rights to Peanut, Peanut's family came in and handled all the arrangements, and they did not let Uncle Johnny go to his funeral. They took all of Peanut's, him and Johnny had like a house and things, like they had stuff that was in both their names. They had shared everything basically for the whole time that they were together, and everything that was in Peanut's name, like the Peanut's aunt took. And so Miss Tina talks about how it was really hard to watch Uncle Johnny go through that, because this had been his husband, his man, for 7 years, and it's like you're being totally freezed out of his transition and like this tragic death. So it was like really tragic all the way around for Uncle Johnny, because not only did he lose his partner, but then like the family that didn't even fuck with him didn't allow him to be a part of anything. And then in addition to that, so Miss Tina, they have their own funeral for Peanut basically, and Johnny is just, she ends it with basically he takes a hit, and it kind of, he was never really the same after Peanut died. Like that was something that very much affected him, and I don't think the way that things played out in terms of him not getting to properly grieve and say goodbye and being like freezed out of all like the process of burying him, I don't think it helped anything. So at the end of this chapter, Johnny's younger sister Denise. Yes, sorry. Remember how Johnny's younger sister Denise was living with them, her and her daughter Ebony? And we talked about that yesterday. They end up moving out because Denise is at the point where she's like, yo, I got it. She wants to spread her wings. She has been living with Miss Tina. Beyonce is 8 now, and they've been living with them for about 4 or 5 years, because they moved in when Beyonce was like 4 or 5, something along those lines. And so she's kind of at the point where she wants to move out. So now, if you remember, Denise and Ebony live in the apartment, like the pool house, in the back of their house. So what does that open up to happen? Uncle Johnny is going to end up moving in, but we'll get there. Okay, so now we're at chapter 23. This is called Three Girls, and it takes place in November of 1990. So we are just we were in spring, and now we're in the winter time. Pool house. So the thing is, Matthew had money. Like, I don't think people are really understanding, between Matthew being a very high-ranking executive at Xerox and Miss Tina having this very successful high-end salon, Beyonce and the Knowles were always upper middle class. They always had the funds to pour that, and that is another testament to nature, nurture, and what funds can do. You know what I'm saying? Because they had the money for the voice lessons. They had the money because you have to think, in the beginning, Miss Tina and Matthew are funding basically everything for the group. Like, you'll see they're going to take over everything. She's making costumes, but what do you have to do? You have to buy the fabric to make the costume. All the little girls are at the house. They have to feed 4 to 5 girls all the time. They're paying for practice. They're paying for this. Like, they poured the money into Beyonce. That's the other thing. They definitely believed in their daughter, but they had the means to execute what they saw as potential in her. So in the winter of 1990, a little girl named Kelly joins Girls Time. And as we know, Beyonce is very, very shy. She do not like talking to nobody. She simply likes singing and dancing and performing, and that's all, right? But this girl Kelly joins, and her and Beyonce click immediately. She auditioned for the group singing, what did they say, what Whitney Houston song? I don't think I wrote it down. Yeah, I didn't write down what Whitney Houston song she sang, but maybe I did. No, I don't know. Okay, so I'll figure it out. I'll remember. She, I'm Your Baby Tonight. Thank you. I was trying to remember it, and I was like, no, I have to remember it because it matters. Now, if you know I'm Your Baby Tonight, you know it's kind of a difficult song to sing. And of course, Whitney Houston makes it seem seamless. Kelly sings it essentially seamlessly too, and that was one of the first things that Beyonce told Miss Tina about. Yes, Kelly Rowland. Kelly. What other Kelly? Kelly Rowland. Kelly. Our Kelly. So that's one of the things Miss Tina talks about, how Beyonce instantly respected Kelly as a equal, like a girl who she saw as another good singer, which this is not me trying to like poke out or seek shade or anything, but up until this point, it's kind of like Beyonce knows she's the best singer in the group, and she feels like Kelly was the first time where she was like, oh, okay, well, you're good as well. And they really click. Things are really starting to take hold with Girls Time. Matthew is becoming much more hands-on, becoming like an unofficial manager of the group, okay? And at this point, the group consists of Beyonce, Kelly, Ashley, Latavia, Nikki, and Nina, who are sisters, and they are dancers, and they are cousins to Latavia, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So Kelly's mom, Doris, is single. Kelly is not really knows her dad. She doesn't really know her dad, Christopher. Her mom is a nanny to white families in Houston and moves around a lot because she tends to live with these families. And that's where all wrong always does when a man is involved. LOL. I don't know. There would be no Beyonce or Destiny's Child without Matthew Knowles. Okay, that's all I'm gonna say. One thing you got. Typically, I would agree, but there would be, and you're going to see in these chapters where I'm talking about, where Miss Tina gives Matthew his tens. Matthew poured into these girls. They both did in different ways, but Matthew definitely he did his big one anyway. And we're going to talk about the favoritism right now, with that people often speculate when it comes to Destiny's Child, Girls Time. Miss Tina, and she says the other girls in the group would say, there's this conception that Matthew favored Beyonce, but he was way harder on Beyonce than the other girls. In fact, they had a saying, because he would always be telling all the other girls, like, oh, you need to do this, da da da, you should know better. Especially you, Beyonce. And she tells this story about how all the girls at the end always knew he was going to single out Beyonce, so they would all say it before he could. But you have to keep in mind they're like 9 or 10, so it's kind of funny. Doris, Kelly starts to get really close to them because since Doris works so late and she's being a nanny and she's raising all these other kids, I'm not saying this in a shady way. Like, she just doesn't, if you ever worked as a nanny, you're raising other kids. So kind of, if you're not with your kid all the time, the parenting there falls by the wayside. And so she starts spending a lot of time with the Knowleses. And she starts spending the night at their house. And Miss Tina recognizes that Doris does not have the support system that she has, and so she doesn't mind Kelly staying at the house and like doing all this. Does Matthew get into it with any of the Destiny Child's mom? No, actually, Miss Tina, we're gonna get there because Miss Tina isn't messy about it, but I'm gonna tell y'all what I think, because the one thing I can say is whatever happened, just know that Matthew and Tina were a united front. It's clear that they were very, like, Matthew gets a lot of slack for because and the thing was, Matthew didn't mind the slack because he's Matthew and he doesn't give a fuck. But it's very clear Tina and him was on the same page. That's what I'm gonna say about when it comes to like how they were ran and like the disagreements that happened in the group. But that's coming up in a chapter, so I'm gonna not get into that. So if you remember from the earlier chapters, one of her older brothers, Larry, the one who acts like Darrington, the very crazy one, his daughter, Angie's dad, Larry came and built a deck in their backyard for the girls to practice on because Matthew wanted them to feel like they were performing on stage. They had to hone their craft and like become confident. And so she talks about how they all just love this stage. All the girls are at their house. Now, okay, I'm going to reference Hive again because there's so many things in this book that we know and have seen that she just provides backstory of. Do you guys know those pictures of Solange and Beyonce? They're little girls and it's at Christmas time and they are in the they're in the green dresses with the red plaid, like the Christmas color dresses. So those pictures came out of the Houston Chronicle Christmas story. As we now, at this point, Miss Tina has headliners. It's a very successful salon. And the story that they were doing was women entrepreneurs at Christmas time, like basically kind of like super moms type shit at Christmas time. You get what I'm saying? Like women in business and things like that. So Uncle Johnny made these dresses. Uncle Johnny has moved into the house where Ebony and Denise moved out of. And um there she tells a story, and I saw her tell this on one of her interviews during the press tour like the last couple months. But the interviewer, whenever, like, she came home late from headliners, and so whenever the interview was like, where'd you guys get your dresses, and Beyonce and Solange were like, Johnny made it. They were like, oh my god, the house is so beautiful and decorated. And Beyonce and Solange like, Johnny decorated it. And they're like, who cooks? And they're like, Johnny cooks. And Miss Tina makes a joke like, so when she gets there, the interviewer's like, oh, you have a wonderful husband, Johnny. And Miss Tina's like, no, Johnny's my wife. And she says that because she's like, Johnny made it possible for her to go out and work and support the family, because he really raised Beyonce and Solange for a long time. And he was there for a little second. So in 1991, it's surprising Matthew allowed Miss Tina's family to move in. No, it's not. If you go back, I talked about this yesterday. Matthew was really supportive of Tina. I think because Matthew couldn't keep his dick in his pants, he obviously gets a bad rap. But Miss Tina, even if you go back to when they first got married, that was one of the things that really kept them together for so long, is when her parents were dying and when they were very old. Her parents were declining in the first year of their marriage. And so obviously you've only been with your husband a year. You want to go take care of your parents. He never gave her a hard time. He was completely supportive of that, whatever she needed. And in whatever ways he could help her support her parents. There's a story in the beginning that her mother wasn't allowed to take communion because she was a divorcee. Mind you, that same church allowed her ex-husband to take communion, and they would sit together at church because they were like a cool blended family. They never said anything to the man about it. It's just a space and time. And so as her mother was dying, Matthew pulled up on the priest and was basically like, y'all need to go let her take communion. Like, she's a devout Catholic. Like, Miss Tina gives hella examples as to how Matthew Knowles was actually a really good friend. I won't say a good husband, but he was a very good friend. And so if you got to read the first half of the book, it's not surprising at all that Johnny was moved in. Matthew was really cool with Tina's family, actually. Which is, again, when people are like, I don't know how they're cool. I don't know how they're cool to this day. It's like, I don't know. She tells us in the book. Some people are better platonic than romantic. And even if you look at her interviews during this whole time, she still cites Matthew as being her protector. Like, he'll pull up behind her and their daughters, which I think is a good trait to have in a husband. But your husband also needs to keep his dick in his pants, Unfortunately, we're multifaceted human beings and we're not perfect. But if your man can keep his dick in his pants, you need to go ahead and leave him alone. That's just me. Oh my God. Okay. So in 1991, as we all know, Whitney Houston sings the Star Spangled Banner, and they all watch it together as a family. And they have this moment where Beyonce is just enamored in watching Whitney Houston sing the Star Spangled Banner. And she says, I'm going to do that one day. And Miss Tina quotes her and says, yes, you will. If you want to do it, you will have it. Which is important because, as we learned from earlier chapters, when Miss Tina had her singing group and she wanted to be a singer and she told her mama she wanted to be a singer, her mom told her that's not realistic. And that really affected her, and that really affected her view of her mother for a lot of years in terms of her feeling like her mom did not support her dreams. So a common theme that we see here is that Matthew and Tina are very supportive of the wants and desires and the dreams of Beyonce, Solange, and Kelly, who we're going to see Kelly quickly becomes another daughter to them. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because Beyonce was becoming kind of well-known in Houston with Girls' Time, and she was recognized as a very talented little girl, we also know that Beyonce and Solange are about 5 years apart. And Miss Tina, being the youngest, talks about, in the earlier chapters, her brother was like an all-star. Her brother was one of the black teenagers who integrated the high school in Galveston in the 60s when civil rights legislation was passing. Her brothers were very well known, and so she often felt eclipsed in their limelight, being the baby. So she was very aware of that when it came to Solange, and so she started doing Solange Wednesdays. Like, Wednesday was Solange Day, where she would spend a little bit extra time with her. And she noticed that since okay, this goes back to Matthew being completely supportive. They did not have a quote unquote normal family, right? Matthew went to work, Tina went to work. They were always running around trying to do everything for the girls and like all this type of shit. And Solange so desperately wanted like a mom, a dad, a mom at home who makes my lunch and da 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 da. And that wasn't Miss Tina. Like Uncle Johnny was the one making their lunch. They had a very like non-conformed 1980s family, which is, if you think, you have a lot of shows on in the 80s, like the Cosby Show, like, you know, all the 80s shows show what a family looks like in a very specific nuclear Western American family structure and setup. So when you think about, my mom goes to work every day and she goes to work just like my dad, and my gay uncle is the one who's like taking care of us and cooking our meals. Solange, being like a 4, 5, 6-year-old, was like, this doesn't look like what I'm being fed at school. And so she just felt really weird about it. So as girls' time become, and just keep that in mind because that's going to come back up later, that Solange really wants to have a normal family. So girls' time is starting to get really well known. Solange said, this is suspicious. This is suspicious. Like, these gender roles are not gender rolling. What the fuck are we doing over here at the Knowles house? Like, what the fuck is going on? So they get a meeting with Suzanne Depasse. If you know who Suzanne Depasse is, she's the lady who discovered the Jackson 5. The light-skinned lady. If you ever watched the Jackson American Dream, she's the light-skinned lady. They end up getting to get in the studio and they get to record because they come across Arnie, what's his name? Arnie Falger? I can't think of his last name right now. So they get some recording time, and in the midst of this, Solange runs away. Just know that. So they're at this recording studio. They're at a big, I forgot what company it was for. What record studio? It doesn't tell me what record studio. I should have wrote it down, but I didn't. And so they're looking for her, and they go in this room, and Solange is talking to 2 young men. Now, who do those 2 young men turn out to be? None other than Tupac and Shock G, who were in the studio recording, because at this point, he's recording with All Def Digital, and the Humpty Dance is out. And it's a really big song at this point in time. And Tupac is laughing at how charismatic Solange is. So is Shock G. They're like, this little girl's a trip. She's really special. Blase, blase. Beyonce and the other girls were way excited because, and they weren't excited to meet Tupac because you got to remember, it's 1990. The Humpty Dance just dropped. Do me, baby. Do the Humpty Hump. Do the Humpty Hump. Tupac was everywhere all at once, right? Yes, Vanessa Williams' character in Jackson Family American Dream. Yes, she's there too. But let me finish the Tupac story. So Tupac says Solange is special. Shock G says she's a trip. Solange is just like 4 or 5 years old, talking their head off. And Miss Tina like rushes her out the room. It's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry that my baby came up in here. I'm so sorry. It's not until way later when around obviously 1993, 46, when Tupac starts to take off, that Beyonce is the one who recognizes Tupac and is like, oh my God, Solange, your friend from the studio. That is your friend from the studio. And it's like, you know what? A lot of like people who we consider legends in the early 90s were like just moving and shaking. They're at studios together. No one knew what the future held. They just know that like you hear a lot of stories like that. Like Keisha Cole was in the studio with Tupac. Like a lot of these people from this age group definitely came up together, and they definitely were like encountering each other very early on. And you're gonna get another example of that later on. So blase, where was it? Oh, back to Suzanne Depasse. So Beyonce in Girls' Time records. Suzanne passes Miss Tina and Matthew a note that says, the girl needs to go solo. Who is the girl? The girl is Beyonce. She says 2 things. The girl needs to go solo and fix the costumes. Now, Miss Tina said she had made them these these sequence tuxedo type shits, and they just kind of aged them like they were too grown, basically. So she said she definitely took that criticism, and that's when they started putting them in like really funky little girl outfits. But that she never told the other parents that Suzanne said that Beyonce needed to go solo. And I think that she put this story in here because she never directly addresses the drama, but she definitely drops breadcrumbs to show that her and Matthew were always advocating for all of the girls at once. Like, obviously their interest is in their daughter. We're not going to fake the funk on that. And then eventually Kelly, because Kelly becomes their daughter. But they always had a vested interest in the group, and so she never shared that piece. And they kind of crumpled the letter up and threw it away because girls' time was fun for Beyonce, and all the girls were having so much fun, and they didn't want to crush their dreams. And she felt like they were still young enough that they could enjoy like just the fun of the fun of it before it had to become a business. Because let's remember, Matthew is her daddy. All right. So, and Matthew is already getting to the point where it's becoming very much business, but Tina wants it to be fun still because this is a hobby that they have. So she doesn't tell them that this happens. So now we're on chapter 24. It's called The Bread of Life. It takes place in summer of 1992. Now, as we know, Miss Tina was raised Catholic. Her mother was a devout Catholic. I do think that Matthew was Baptist or Methodist. I can't remember. But Beyonce and Solange are basically raised Methodist. Now, that seems like an easy transition from Catholicism. I'm sure they got married and at whatever point just decided to start going to a church together as a family, which a lot of married couples do, and this is what they chose. She was, by them being upper middle class and both her and Matthew being raised very poor, it was extremely important for them to make sure that Beyonce and Solange were grounded and that they weren't spoiled brats. That's something that through all the chapters of the book, she talks about in terms of making sure that they understood that they were blessed, that there were people less fortunate than them, that it is up to us to give back to our communities and, just be aware of our surroundings and what other people are going through. That's a big thing with Miss Tina. So she raised them. They started going out they started at Windsor Village Methodist Church, which was a mega church that she says she really liked going to. But at some point, if you're under official, I don't know how to explain this to not church people, but like, okay, you have Methodists, you might have AME, which is the Black Methodist. I can't remember what that stands for. You have like Kojic, Church of God in Christ. You have Missionary Baptist, which is also like a sect. And they have like headquarters. And then like, you have churches that are under this. And so what basically came down was they were kind of absorbing St. John's Downtown Methodist Church, which is a big church here in Houston, and Miss Tina is still involved with that church to this day. They actually just opened up they broke ground on a homeless shelter last year, which makes sense when I'm about to tell you this story. This is something that Miss Tina's always been into. So this church, St. John's Downtown, was basically like dying out. They only had like 9 white families at the church, which again is funny now because St. John's Downtown is a Black church now, but this makes sense because they took from the mega church and they assigned African Methodist Episcopal. Thank you. I was like, I can't think of what AME stands for right now. Sorry. So they took from the mega church, they assigned 10 families to basically go downtown and help build this up. And the Knowles, since they were, and you know how this works, if you were raised in church, when things like this happen, they usually pick people who are dedicated and be at church every Sunday. Miss Tina and the Knowles were at church every Sunday. And so they were one of the families that got picked to go to St. John's. She talks about how even though she knew it wasn't that, it felt like she was being casted out of her church. She talks about how like sad she was because she really liked her church. Like, and I can understand that. I can imagine if like I'm at Wheeler and all of a sudden they're like, Mecca, you can't come here no more. We need you to go over there. Oh my God. I want to hang out with everyone over here. Why are you guys making me leave? Like, I got what she was saying. She's like, oh my God, I know this is for the greater good, but like, oh my God, what the heck? So, but it turns out great. They spend months getting the church back together, helping to build the church up. And one of the things that the new pastors start is the Bread of Life ministry, that's the ministry that she is still involved in. I think to this day, I'm pretty sure it's the Bread of Life. But anyway, they start feeding homeless people every other Sunday. after church. And so she signs Beyonce and Solange up to feed the homeless after church every other Sunday, which this becomes, it's not an issue, but it is teaching Beyonce and Solange a lesson, because typically, like most Black people, after church, you go get food because you've been in church for what, 2-3 hours. You're hungry. And if you're a Black person in Houston, you might go to Luby's. And she talks about how, I said, this is so crazy that we are all the same. Like, the fact that Beyonce is so fucking Black and just does the same, like, we all do the same shit. Anyway, that's like a whole other point. She talks about how Beyonce and Solange used to, hold on. Sorry, Joseph tried to call me and I just had to ignore his call. I'll get back with him once I'm done with this. She talks about how Beyonce and Solange always used to get the Salisbury steak at Luby's. And I'm just like, ugh, the taste jumped out. Luby's Salisbury steak is so good. It's so good. Like, that's why I'm like, oh my God, Beyonce and Solange, they're just like me. Like, they're literally just like me. And so on the Sundays that they had to, give back and give to the church, it was always kind of like pulling teeth a little bit, because they're like, oh my God, I'm so hungry. But they eventually got used to it. They eventually became a little bit more, right, bye Joe, sorry. They eventually just knew that was what was time to do. And so then Miss Tina wants to take a step further. Again, she is an active church-going woman of God. And she said, what else can I do? Actually, I have an idea, Pastor. And she says, I want to offer the homeless women who are coming to get food free haircuts at my salon. And Miss Tina talks about how networking when you're poor is different than networking when you're rich. And even though her girls were growing up upper middle class and networking for them would look a little bit different, she remembers being badass Teeny B, very poor in Galveston, and what networking looked like. And so she created a space where they would offer these free, like a day or something, where women could come in and get free haircuts. And she would schedule them during points in time with the working women who came to the salon as well, so she could be like, oh, don't you own this? She needs a job. Go here and talk to her. Oh, don't you do this? Oh, and she had she calls it, how does she call it? She's like, this is how, she just talks about this is how poor people network. Like, you really have to go somewhere and be like, hey girl, I got this skill. Like, what can we do? Like, what can we make work? So that was really cool to learn. Miss Tina's really like Saint Tina, honestly. In addition to this, as we know, I didn't know this. I saw pictures of it on Twitter recently, but Miss Tina had Hair International, which was a Black magazine, like a hair book that they would sell at the Bonner Brother hair shows and other hair shows. And if you know about the beauty salons in the 90s, hair books were like a really big thing. So they had a book that was actually pretty successful for a couple years. And again, just going back to the point that Beyonce and Solange were raised Black upper middle class, they had the means to make shit happen. Now, they weren't necessarily making a whole bunch of money off this book. They were basically breaking even, but she liked it, and Matthew thought it was a really good idea, and he thought it was going to really take off. So at this point in time, people in her salon, you know how it is. They're always like, does your daughter still sing? Like, when is she going to do this? And so she just talks about how, for about a year or whatever, she's getting kind of snarky comments from people in the salon asking about Beyonce's music career. And they finally get an opportunity, because she's just become really big on the Houston circuit. But finally, they get an opportunity to perform on Star Search. Now, if we know the intro to Flawless and the outro, it is their introduction, the hip hop rapping girls group, Girls Time. And then it's like, and the winners are Skeleton Key. So that is the intro and outro. And she talks about how now Star Search is a part of this Beyonce Destiny's Child lore. But in November of 1990, and this is chapter 25, I'm sorry. And this chapter is called Loss is Fuel. Now, I know, again, we're talking about how is Matthew Knowles worth a damn. Here, we're about to start seeing where Matthew being a good father is coming into play. So Matthew didn't, she tells how the girls took the loss on Star Search hard. And Matthew didn't let that derail them, right? Matthew was kind of like, the loss is fuel. He was like, nah, this is gonna be the thing. And so Ed McMahon, who was the host of Star Search and also like a very successful actor and whatnot in his own right, Matthew asked him like, what could they have done better? And and Ed McMahon basically tells him, don't stop, don't quit. It doesn't matter. He's like, the ones who win, the ones who lose, if they don't stop, they end up being successful and going somewhere. And if you think about everyone who has been on Star Search, there have been some heavy hitters. Justin Timberlake was on Star Search. Christina Aguilera was on Star Search. All these people did not win Star Search. Was Britney on Star Search? A lot of people who came up during the late 90s and the 90s were on Star Search. And the ones who kept going, like Ed McMahon said, were successful. The ones who did not allow that loss on Star Search, Aaliyah was on Star Search, yep. The ones that didn't allow the loss to like dictate their next move, they were the ones who really made shit shake in the end. So the reason, by the end of this chapter, Matthew decides that he is going to no longer be the unofficial manager, and he is now going to become the official manager. Now, this happens for a couple reasons. One, it's slowly happening all through the book. She talks about how Matthew was like a drill sergeant. He had them running and singing, which we know is a part of iconic Destiny's Child lore, but he had them doing that shit at like 8 years old, like a madman. like, And specifically on Star Search, Matthew wanted them to sing Sunshine, I believe, by the Temptations. He wanted them to sing it because he felt like it was going to show... Oh, no, not by the Temptations. Sunshine, I can't think of who it's by. But he wanted them to sing Sunshine because he felt like it was going to show their vocal range. He felt like all the girls had very strong and good voices, and the way that we're going to win this competition is we're going to show how you can sing. And he got outvoted. They ended up doing a little hip-hoppy rap song, and they didn't win. So he's like, okay, now I got to be the manager. Now I have to get a title, because if y'all had listened to me, which is basically how he felt. And so he tells Miss Tina, I'm going to quit my corporate job. His 6-figure earning job. The Clark sisters. Yes. I was like, what the freak? The Clark sisters, Sunshine. And as we know, that song is a very vocally heavy song. They would have got to showcase their range. And again, you got to remember, these girls are like 11 years old. It would have been amazing to see an 11-year-old Beyonce sing Sunshine. I mean, my God, I kind of wish Matthew had won. You know, I wish he had been the official manager before so that they would have fucking listened to him, right? But it was a different time. They wanted to do a little singing hip hop. And that's why Matthew said, I have to be the manager now, because I will not be outvoted again. Okay? And as we see, for a very long time, Matthew Knowles was not outvoted again. And Matthew Knowles does have a mind for business, and he be knowing what he talk about on that business shit. Now, sometime, because he do be losing money. But he make it right back. I also feel like that's another reason why we'll see this constant back and forth with Miss Tina, because Matthew would do shit and lose money, but then it would be like he made it right back. So it's like, damn, we're not on our dick for hella long, but what? Come on. Okay. So, in addition to him quitting his job and becoming Destiny's Child manager, Girls Time manager full time, they have this salon, which up until this point has been Miss Tina's project. So he's like, yeah, now that this is like our only source of income, I have to make sure that this shit is profitable. And because Matthew Knowles is a business genius, he comes in and starts making changes. Now, what do we know about hair salons? A hair salon is one of those businesses that you have to run. You can't just completely have a business mind. Like you have to have that element of human connection that at times we know Matthew Knowles lacks. He just is like, well, no, that doesn't make money. And Miss Tina is very much like, but I love you. This is a human connection. And so as we see that makes them bump heads, she says she quickly had to kick him out, and he quickly had to get the fuck up. He had to find a little, I forgot what she said he started doing to just occupy his time, make a little money on the side. But she was like, girl, no, Matthew, please get the fuck. Because she was using all these high-end products And she was not making, I don't know, it wasn't that she wasn't making money, but it wasn't as profitable as it could have been because she was charging a baseline price. She was using very high end products, and it was kind of like, okay, this doesn't make sense price wise. Like if you're going to use a high end product, you can't charge a regular product price, which is what Matthew came in and said. He wanted to go up on prices, but she was like, no, I'm not going to go up on prices. I don't want to upset my customers. So unbeknownst to her, and this is, mind you, she said Matthew doing this saved her salon. But after he did this, this is when she fired him. He added on a $2 service charge across the board. So they didn't go up on products, but basically they added like a gratuity onto the prices. And she said that shit changed the game for her, made things very profitable, allowed her to really comfortably become the breadwinner. But after that, she was like, okay, that's enough of that. You need to leave. And mind you, isn't that funny? In 1990, she talks about how her clients complained about the $2 service charge. I fucking wish. You guys didn't know how good you had it. So, we're on chapter 26. We are in the summer of 1993, and this chapter is called Three Sisters. Now, we're wondering who the three sisters are. Yes, this is when Kelly becomes considered a daughter. So, Solange is living in the younger sister's shadow. And again, Miss Tina is just very aware of what it's like to be a younger sibling and feeling overshadowed by your very successful and talented older siblings. Wait, what question the other Beyonce never sang? Huh? The other Beyonce never sang. Okay. I'm sure you'll re-ask that. Oh, Angie. No, Angie doesn't sing. Angie Beyonce, that's Angie's Angie's last name Beyonce is spelled with an I. And Angie doesn't sing, but she is going to pop back up. She's definitely coming back up because we know Miss Tina's girls, her daughters, are going to be Beyonce, Solange, Kelly, and Angie. Those are the girls who at different points in time lived with her and who she helped raise. So Angie is definitely coming. Angie stays with them every summer. That's something that we talked about yesterday, but she is coming back. So Angie is still in the mix for sure. And it's getting to the point where at this point Solange is about 7 years old and she wants to perform too. Now, Miss Tina is honest and she says she doesn't want Solange to become a performer. She thinks that Solange is so smart. She thinks she gets good grades in school and she really wants Solange to go to college. But they decide to, she decides to let Solange make her own decisions and they start to let her perform around this time. Now, Solange is 7 and Beyonce is 12. And we know that with any sibling dynamic, it gets to the point where the older sibling wants to break away. I can tell you, me and my brother are only 2 years apart. And there was a point in time, especially around the time, right, where I went to middle school, where I was like, oh my God, get the fuck away from me. You know what I'm saying? Like, we were definitely getting to that. They're getting to that point. And she started noticing that Beyonce was not always considerate of Solange's feelings, especially when the other girls in the group are around. Again, you have to remember their house is the hub for girls' time. So they're constantly performing. There's constantly a bunch of girls at the house. And so you have the baby sister tagging along and Beyonce's always like, ugh, get the fuck away from me, Solange. And she just kind of didn't like the way that Beyonce was treating Solange. So she decides to put them in counseling. Now, what we know is that in 1993, mental health was not looked at or received the way that we receive it now in 2025. In fact, she doesn't name which one of her siblings, but she says one of her siblings told her she was going to make them crazy by putting them in counseling. And much like in the year of our Lord 2025, Miss Tina says it was important to her that Beyonce and Solange had a Black therapist. So they have a Black therapist. He's this guy. He is gay. That's going to become important later, but not right now. And Solange really takes to it. Solange is a very chatty patty. She's very talkative, as we know. She literally walked off and was talking to Tupac and Shock G. Like, she's a conversationalist. And I understand that. Beyonce, not so much. She hated it because it's like, I also hate talking. I only want to sing. So it's like, now you're sitting here making me talk? Don't like it. Get me the fuck out of here. Beyonce said, bitch, this shit sucks. Essentially what happened. But even though Beyonce didn't like it, Miss Tina says that she started noticing a difference in how Beyonce was treating Solange. She gives an example at how when at practice one day, one of the girls says something rude to Solange, and Beyonce says, "Don't talk to my sister like that." Solange, what do you have to say? Up until that point, that really wasn't Beyonce's reaction. She would have told Solange to get out the room and go away, but she checked her bandmate. She doesn't say which one of the girls was the one who said this, but she said she checked it and she said, "Don't talk to my sister like that," which for her was a good sign, and that's all she really wanted. So we're back to the point that Solange craves intimacy, and the therapist comes to her one day and says there are beach days. Now, if you didn't watch yesterday, beach days was something that Miss Tina did with Solange and Beyonce from time to time. She would skip school. So she would take them out of school on like a random day. And obviously Beyonce loved it because Beyonce wasn't really into school. Solange hated it because Solange liked school. And they would basically play hooky. And they would go to the beach in Galveston where Miss Tina's from, and they would spend the day together. And because she was like this working woman, it was a way for Miss Tina to spend time with her daughters. She finds out that Solange doesn't like beach days, and she's like, "What kind of mom lets you skip school? Like, what the fuck is going on?" Because Solange has this idea of like what a family looks like, and she feels like her family is not normal, and she really doesn't like it. So her therapist is telling Miss Tina like she's reading you doing the beach days as a, you don't care about her education. And Miss Tina talks about how that was the furthest thing from it. It's not that she didn't care about Solange's education, but she more so cared about Solange. She wanted Solange and Beyonce to be close. She wanted them to feel like they could talk to her, and they didn't have the type of family and schedule where they could just take time off. So this was a time for them to spend together. But what she ends up doing is starts letting Solange come into the salon and talk to women who like are more normal so that she can kind of feel like she has an end to that. Like Miss Tina's always trying to like see their side and show up for her daughters in the way that they need her to show up for them. So this part, now I'm going to try and say this without being shady, because I understand not everyone's situation is the same. As we know, Miss Doris, who is Kelly's biological mom, is a nanny. She nannies for white families, and she gets and before they met the Knowles, this meant that Kelly had to move around a lot because she was constantly in and out, in and out, in and out. She gets a job working for a white family who does not want Kelly to live at the house with their children. And she takes the job. Now, she takes the job because Tina offers her to be able to stay this summer. I think the way that Miss Tina kind of presents it is if she didn't take this job, Kelly wouldn't necessarily be able to stay in the group, or like she was trying to figure it out. Why you would want to work for people who wouldn't want your baby living with them, that I'm not gonna lie. Now, this is not me trying to be judgy. Right, isn't it? Sorry, I'm reading the comments. Isn't it funny that the one who wanted to be normal so bad is the one who's like the most eccentric? That just goes to show you that one day probably Solange woke up and was like, you know what? Fuck normalcy. Let me just be eccentric. But anyway, back to Kelly and Miss Doris. I'm not gonna lie, I definitely did side-eye Doris on this. But nonetheless, again, everything happens the way it happens for a reason. And Kelly moves in with the Knowleses, and this turns out to be a very good situation for Kelly, you know? It turns out to be good because Kelly never actually moves out. The plan is for Kelly to stay the summer, and the summer turns into 6 years. Touched on a little bit interview with. Yes, she did. I do remember that. Which honestly, I should have watched that before I went live so I could have talked about it because I can't remember it exactly. Okay, so once Kelly moves in, she talks about how even here I'm just ignoring everyone's calls right now. Let me put my phone on Do Not Disturb, child. Like, I'm on live. Darrington is trying to blow me up. Okay. If my child can't be there. So, sorry. Everyone's trying to blow me up. Joe tried to call me, now Darrington. Okay. Kelly and Beyonce never fight. Solange and Kelly do. Which, I mean, that makes sense. not in like a shady way, but Solange is so opinionated, and it's very clear. Like, the things that we know about Solange in terms of her hating Jay-Z in the elevator, Miss Tina paints a picture that Solange is badass Teeny B. Badass Rumi C is Solange and badass Teeny B. Like, you have a direct line. Beyonce is not like her. Like, it's clear that Beyonce is the weird one. Beyonce is the one that's willing not to turn up. Miss Tina is down to turn up. Solange down to turn up. Rumi down to turn up. That's not Beyonce, and that's cool. Like, that's cool, but that's Solange is like her mama. That's what I'm saying. And she gives us so many examples of that all along the way, that Solange always been like this. So I can definitely see Solange and Kelly getting into arguments, and Beyonce and Kelly not. But there are two examples in which Miss Tina talks about how Beyonce has always been so quiet, and she never really how do I say this? She never really expressed disapproval with things. Like, she kind of always went with the flow, and Miss Tina was always really worried about Beyonce letting people run over her because she wouldn't tell people how she was feeling because she didn't really talk. But when Kelly moves in, even though Kelly is her best friend, even though they don't get into arguments, there are two things that happen. Miss Tina didn't want to step on Miss Doris's toes, in terms of she didn't want to replace her as her mother. Kelly now calls Miss Tina Ma, but during this point in time, she calls her Auntie Tina because Tina did not want to replace Miss Doris, and she had to buy, Kelly needed new clothes for school or something, and she didn't want to buy them because she didn't want to like step on Doris' toes. Now, that's number one, and so Tina tells Beyonce, how she handles it, instead of like being like, oh, can I go buy your daughter clothes? She's like, well, I'll buy Beyonce new clothes, and then, you feel me, she can wear Beyonce's old clothes. So she tells Beyonce, you have to tap the screen. Why do you tap the screen? Did I do something? Child, trying to do this live and talking, like, tap the screen. Fuck, I need to tap the screen for. So she tells Beyonce, you gotta give Kelly some of your clothes. And Beyonce's like, I don't want to share my clothes with Kelly. And she doesn't even tell her you have to give them to her. She says you have to share your clothes with Kelly. And Beyonce's like, I don't want to share my clothes with Kelly. And he was like, well, you don't have a choice. You have to share your clothes with Kelly. So what Beyonce says is, actually, she can just have it. And Miss Tina says that Beyonce is like that to this day. She will give you the clothes off her back, but the moment she gives it to you, you better go ahead and keep it. It's yours. And I can just say, as someone who is kind of like that, like, if it's something that I know I want, I'm not going to give out nothing that I don't mind never seeing again. So I really feel Beyonce here. Like, if I'm going to be like, girl, here, go ahead, wear it, I don't expect to see it again. It's okay. You can keep it. So we're here on that. The second thing that Miss Tina is really proud of Beyonce for doing is expressing her feelings when it comes to the fact that Kelly starts calling Matthew dad. Now, the thing about this is Kelly's dad, Christopher, was never really a present figure in her life. And so she never had, like, there were no toes to step on with that. So she starts calling Matthew dad, and Beyonce is like, I don't like that she's calling my daddy daddy. And it's funny because Miss Tina literally says that, like, I don't like that she is calling my daddy daddy. What the fuck is going on? And Miss Tina has to explain to Beyonce, like, it's okay to share him. Like, just because Kelly's calling him dad doesn't mean that he's not your dad. And but she says she's also really proud that Beyonce was able to express that, because typically Beyonce, like it's not your dad, Kelly, like, that's my dad. Like, we're like, Kelly, we're homegirls. I get it. Like, I love you, but like, not your dad. And so when she talks about how she's really proud of Beyonce, because Beyonce usually doesn't do shit like that. And this was like one of the first times that Beyonce really expressed like disapproval and like not liking something, like, no, I feel this way. So she wanted to kind of validate that while also being like, he's still gonna be your daddy, girl. Don't you trip. That's still your daddy. Like, so here, another thing happens is that Solange's therapist, who I told you was a gay man, he dies from AIDS very, very quickly. As we know, this is the year 1993, and a lot of times when diagnosis like AIDS came down in 1993, it was a very quick process in terms of death. And so Solange is in third grade at this point, and it hits her very hard. So because of this, as we know, Uncle Johnny is living in the apartment in the pool house. He has a new boyfriend because Peanut has died, right? And Miss Tina talks about how she hates Johnny's boyfriend. She thinks Johnny's too good for him. And also she thinks he's promiscuous. Now, she says at this point in time, promiscuous is one of them words that's very loaded. But she was like, Johnny was just a one fella guy. Like, she's only seen Johnny have one boyfriend. Peanut was his main long-term boyfriend, and she doesn't think that this new boyfriend is being faithful to Johnny. And so with the death of Solange's therapist and AIDS being very prevalent in the gay community, she really does become concerned about this boyfriend and the possible way that he's moving. She comes to Johnny about this, and they get into a huge argument, and he ends up moving out. And he starts kicking it with their, they have a mutual homegirl named Marlene, who they're both friends with. And as we know, Miss Tina and Johnny is her nephew, but they've been besties their whole life. That's how he even ended up living in the apartment behind the house. And they've been like this since they were children. And so she's sad because she feels like because this whole thing happened, he's replaced her with Marlene because he starts hanging out with Marlene super heavy, and they end up becoming best friends, and her and Johnny grow apart. Now, even though her and Johnny grow apart, it's not like Johnny just doesn't stop coming around because he's very close to Beyonce. And no, Johnny is 4 years older than Miss Tina. Someone asked, is Johnny and Tina the same age? So yeah, they're growing apart, but it's kind of weird because he's still family, even though they're besties, and he's still coming around because he's still very close with Beyonce and Solange. He has helped to raise Beyonce and Solange. So during birthday parties and Christmas and who's always showing up? Uncle Johnny. So Uncle Johnny's very much still in the picture. He's just no longer there as Miss Tina's like best friend. So while this is all going on, they're hit with a huge tax lien, and they have to sell the house in Parkwood, and they move into Braes Meadow Drive. Now, here's the thing. Braes Meadow Drive is another very nice neighborhood in Houston, but they just couldn't afford the house on Parkwood anymore, and so Miss Tina sees how Matthew is kind of spending money on the Hair International magazine, how he spends money on the group. And so she says, to cover our bases, I'm going to pay the rent at the salon for a year. And because she is a breadwinner at this point, and she talks about how after she did that, she had $25,000 left in her account. And she says, for me, for badass Teeny B, that's a lot of money. And I would have thought I was rich. But for me, Tina Knowles, I was like, this is not enough for us to live off of because we're doing all this shit. So chapter 27 is, oh my God, we're already at an hour. Jesus freaking Christ. I'm just talking. I'm going to try and speed through this. 27 is called The Dolls. It takes place in summer of 1994. Beyonce is 13. Matthew has gone full throttle in being Destiny's Child manager. He's sending tapes all around to all the people, and one ended up in the hands of Daryl Simmons. Daryl Simmons is, he was in a group in the 80s. I didn't write down what group he was in, but he is signed, Daryl himself is signed to Elektra. And so he wants to sign the girls to him. So that's going to be the issue with this deal. The girls are not signed to Elektra. They are signed to Daryl, who is signed to Elektra. And he wants to rename the girls, the girls' time, the Dolls. So for this point, they're going by the Dolls. They're no longer girls' time right now. They're the Dolls. And he wants them to come to Atlanta for the summer of 1994 so that they can, record and kind of get a feel for the music industry. Now, here's the thing. Daryl is young and he's rich. That's how Miss Tina describes him. He's doing a lot. He's living fast. He's spending money. And these girls are 12 and 13 years old and 14. Now, this is where I start to think that Miss Tina is setting up, even though she never directly addresses Destiny's Child drama, you see it get set up here, okay? And I'm gonna point this out because the members of the dolls are the same members of Destiny's Child, are the same beginning members of Destiny's Child. They just ended up changing their name once they got signed. But anyway, they had one thing about present parents is that they are, they're present and they're protective of their children, and so they allow the girls to go stay the summer with Daryl in Atlanta to be able to record and have opportunity, because there was a lot of shit moving and shaking in Atlanta in the 90s. This was a hub for hip hop and the black music industry. But they went with Latavia's mom, Cheryl. They had agreed that they would always have a chaperone, and then they would give her a break, like every 2 weeks, Matthew and Tina would come up. They had ground rules, so they didn't want, since they were so young, they did not want them around cursing. Like, this is something that was known and that people talk about. I think I've heard this, like, this is a part of Destiny's Child lore, that no, people were not allowed to curse around them. You could not smoke weed around them. You could not talk promiscuous or talk sexually around these girls. Like, they were supposed to have an adult with them at all times. That's why when Cheryl was with them, if Cheryl wasn't with them, Tina and Matthew was with them, and they were switching off, but they were never to be left alone. That is something that Miss Tina talks about. They all sat down and as parents agreed on. So they got to meet during this time. They got to meet and hang out with TLC, Usher, and Monica. And she talks about, we know that Monica and Beyonce, all of them are the same age, and Monica had songs out at this time. And so she talks about how meeting Monica was really, it left a print on them, because it was like they got to see someone their age who was successfully doing this. And so it just made it seem like it was a little bit more like this dream was really attainable. So she doesn't specify which girl in TLC was having the birthday party, but we know that the dolls, aka a young Destiny's Child, get to go to one of the TLC girls' birthday party in summer of 1994. Now, the deal here was, again, you have to remember, they are away from home for a summer, and these are middle schoolers. They are always supposed to have an adult with them. And, okay, I don't know, it said, I think I said a word. Okay. They're always supposed to have an adult with them. And so they had agreed that Cheryl, again, Latavia's mom, would go to the party with them. They would stay an hour and go home. Well, Miss Cheryl is getting her hair done, and her hair appointment goes overtime. So what happens? Daryl and all the people are back at the house. They're saying, oh, we can't wait for you. And they end up leaving with the girls. And so Latavia's mom, Cheryl, calls Beyonce's parents, Tina and Matthew. And Miss Tina doesn't say this, but it seems like some drama ensued, right? She's very tactful, but I'm going to go ahead and speculate here, because she's very clear. She says that as a result of this situation, Miss Cheryl, Latavia's mom, felt disrespected by the other adults of the parents, or the other adults in the group. So let me just surmise, as a grown-ass lady who had a kid living with me, we all sat here and agreed that these girls are in middle school, and that one of us is going to be with them at all times, because this is the music industry. It's 1994. R. Kelly is running rampant, and there is a plethora of other things that they could get into. You were getting your hair done and essentially lost them. They left with the other people, and you were supposed to be with them. To the point, again, you have to remember this is the 90s, so she didn't even really know where the party was. Miss Tina talks about how they had to call around to get the location of the party, and the girls were really excited because it was one of the first time that they got to do some shit without Miss Tina and them up their ass, and they got to stay an hour longer than they would have under normal circumstances. But she's very clear that Miss Cheryl felt disrespected. And Miss Tina also says that was not their aim. That was not their aim to disrespect Cheryl, but they had laid out clear ground rules. Let me see. They should have been at the salon with her. I thought she was mad at the other adults. Chat, who's in the group at this point in time? So at this point in time, we are at, hold on, let me go back. I can tell you, I wrote down the girls who were in the group. It's Kelly, Beyonce, Damn, where did I write it down at? I just Latavia for sure. It's Kelly, Beyonce, Latavia, Latoya, I believe, and yeah, Latoya. Okay, Kelly, Beyonce, Latavia, and Latoya is it's the first. The Dolls is Destiny's Child. They just had not. They had to name the Dolls before they became Destiny's Child. So yeah, I think that she put this story in here because, as we know, Latavia and Latoya are the ones who end up going, and I think that this is to paint a picture that there was already a bit of tension between the parents. You know, they're in you know, it's, yeah, I can't say that I don't understand, you know. I wrote this down and I wanted to say this part. I think because both Matthew and Miss Tina are entrepreneurs, they are business owners, and they are people's bosses. I wonder if that played into how this like came off. Do you get what I'm saying? Because if you're used to being someone's boss, if you're used to moving in a very corporate setting, and when things don't happen the way that they are supposed to happen, you approach it with a certain precision, a certain, like, this is simply what it is. This is what needed to happen, and it didn't happen. That's unacceptable, right? That doesn't necessarily have to be rude, but if you are in a business setting, people are very clear on their expectations. And that's even how Miss Tina lays it out in the chapter. The expectations was that an adult was always to be with the girls. This did not happen, and so that was a problem, especially considering that the girls are in a different state and the rest of the parents are back in Houston. And I think that Latavia's mom, Miss Cheryl, took it personally. And took it personally. And this is me speculating, but just based on the information that she put in the book. This is chapter 27. This is called The Dolls. And again, the expectations of the group are you're gonna see where they come into play again. So, Daryl ends up dropping them because Miss Tina kind of hears that someone was smoking weed around the girls, and she said she wasn't rude. She just kind of approached him and was like, "Hey, I heard that someone was smoking weed around the girls. I thought we agreed that would not be happening." And so Daryl kind of flips it back on her and says, "You're never going to survive in the music industry. You're so freaking dense." And Miss Tina talks about, and he's like, "Actually, fuck this. I'm going to drop the girls from the label." And Miss Tina talks about how for decades, mind you, this was in 1994, so she doesn't find out the real reason to you have to assume after 2004, because she couldn't figure out, she felt like she had ruined their opportunity for decades in terms of like, she pulled up and said, "Hey, I thought they weren't supposed to be smoking weed and all this stuff." And like what the hell? And he flipped it back on them and dropped it. But years later, 2004, the girls are really successful, I guess. Matthew ran into Daryl, and he just, Matthew Knowles, very, again, precision, business. Why did you drop the girls? Was it because of that? And we find out that it isn't. It's because Elektra had dropped Daryl. And that was why I was saying them being signed to their own record deal is going to become important, because they were signed to Daryl, who was signed to Elektra. Now Elektra drops Daryl. Now the Dolls is dropped too, right? And so he had been trying to kind of get them signed on their own, but it wasn't really happening. And he didn't have the heart to tell them because they were all so excited. So that when Miss Tina pulled up onto him and kind of was like talking about this boundary that they had set, he just saw it as a way out. And she talks about how that was crazy as fuck because, she thought that she had ruined their lives. This is a story about Solange being Solange. She encounters a teacher from Alabama who is using the N-word, trying to teach little kids the N-word. Texas, 90s. Matthew and her go up there. Miss Tina, Matthew gives her a piece of the mind, and Miss Tina threatens to beat this lady ass. That's all you need to know. Matthew Yeah, she wants to stop doing Hair International, which is the magazine, and Matthew doesn't. He basically takes out $50K and throws it out the window, and Miss Tina leaves him. Because when you think about it, like, can you imagine your husband just kind of like blowing $50,000 unbeknownst to you? It's like, yeah, I don't know. I have to get out of here. And so this is the first time. Okay, so remember the first time she left him when Solange was like 3 weeks old, but she ended up going back to him because the dog at her friend's house who she was staying with, the dog attacked her and she had like small children. So you got to think that was in 1986. It's been almost 10 years. It's 1995 now. So she actually ends up doing it this time. And this is chapter 28. It's called The Mother of Invention. So she leaves him. And she gets her own apartment in River Oaks. Now, she says, if you live in Houston, you're going to laugh at what I'm about to say. But I went to River Oaks looking for a cheap apartment. And as someone who lives in Houston, Miss Tina. But then she goes on to explain, I went to River Oaks looking for the cheapest apartment they had because I wanted Solange and Kelly to get into good schools. Now, Beyonce and I believe it was LaToya. Beyonce and LaToya had gotten to a performing arts school. Kelly had not. And so she wanted them to have the River Oaks district zip code so that they could have access to the good River Oaks school district. So she goes down and she finds an apartment and she talks to the lady and she's like, she went in trying to have like a poker face. And she ends up just telling the lady, like, hey, I just left my husband and I need to leave him today, not tomorrow. I have money. I can give you first and last month's rent and whatever else you need, but I need to get out of here. And she said the lady showed her compassion and said, okay. And she said, like, she wondered if someone had at one point in time showed the lady compassion for the same reason. You know, you kind of wonder, like, what makes people like, why did you say yes to me? But sometimes people are just good people. Now, the thing that she talks about is that it's a downgrade, obviously, for her girls who are used to growing up in these huge houses. They've moved about 3 times at this point, and every house has been huge. One of the houses had a pool in the backyard. All the houses have had big backyards and been able to accommodate for the girls of the girls' time, the dolls, like all the singing group shit. And that kind of stops, right? Because now they're in this 2-bedroom and they don't have the space no more. And so she talks about this is the first time she saw Beyonce cry. Or they heard, someone told her Beyonce was crying. I can't remember who. And Beyonce didn't cry. Solange was mad, which, again, it's Solange. And Kelly was worried. So she talks about the feelings of all the girls, how Solange is upset with her. Beyonce is crying, and usually Beyonce doesn't cry. She holds it in. And Kelly is worried because this is the first time in her life Kelly has had stability, and so she's kind of worried that she's going to have to go back and, like, kind of live with her mom and stuff. She describes, and again, getting back to Matthew and why she, people are like, how are you still cool with Matthew? Matthew this, Matthew that. She describes Matthew as a good man who makes bad decisions. And I think that reading this book, up until this point, like, we've read 28 chapters of this book, and for like 10 of them, Matthew Knowles has been in them. And she's told a plethora of stories about him and the things that he's done, both good and bad. And so she says this statement that she married a man much like her father, a good man who makes bad decisions sometimes. And we know with her dad, she often looked at her mom as a bad guy because her dad would, like, want to party on the weekends and come home drunk. But he was a good dad and he was a husband who showed up. But we're all, like, complex individuals. And so she sees the same thing happening with herself. Like, she has to be the bad guy because she doesn't want to talk bad about Matthew to the girls. Like, she's like, when Solange pulls up on her and is basically like, my daddy only has beer in his fridge and he's lonely because you left him. Like, this is a real conversation. She talks about how it's like, she can't tell Solange, your daddy threw away all the money and won't stop fucking women. Like, it's just like, but she does think, she does say she wished she had been a little bit more honest with the girls about how does she put it? She says she doesn't talk about Matthew at all because she doesn't want to talk bad about him. So she doesn't talk about him at all. And she says that she kind of wishes she had been more transparent with her feelings because maybe, like, obviously kids understand things. Like, you can't explain it to them like they're grown. But if you tell them, like, hey, it's not working, you know, it's just not working, you know, like, and it's not working for whatever reason. But she allowed the girls to kind of be mad at her for this. But it comes to Christmas time. She wanted so this goes on for like whatever 6 months, right? And so Christmas time, she really wanted things to feel normal for them. And she, since it was just her at this point paying for everything, began to prepare for Christmas way earlier, right? So she's putting shit on layaway. The big gift that year was she got Kelly an electric guitar, which she had been wanting for some time. And I think that says a lot about Miss Tina's character, that the most expensive gift she bought that year for her girls was for Kelly, and Kelly's not her biological daughter. But she said Kelly had been wanting the electric guitar for a couple years, and so when she saw one in the pawn shop, she got it. And she wanted it to feel as normal as possible. So she invited Matthew. She invited Kelly's mom, Doris. And she allowed them to do like all their regular Christmas traditions in terms of they usually go to the hotel and eat on Christmas Day. She let Matthew come and help open presents. And she talks about how on Christmas, she was all of a sudden, you gotta think, she hasn't been speaking of or to Matthew for like 6 months. And so then you invite him over for Christmas, and she was like, it instantly was like they were a family again, like no time had passed. And you have to also remember, it's 1995 at this point. They got married in like 1977. I think they had been dating since 1976. Like they have been together over 20 years at this point. So it's really hard to like erase whatever chemistry that they had for the last 20 years, because she never said like I hated him. She's always clear like I loved Matthew, like I loved my husband. He used to do shit that was just like bad. And so she talks about how like specifically this stuck out to me. The inside jokes, like their inside jokes that they had spent 20 something years cultivating, and you haven't seen them in 6 months, and all of a sudden y'all are back joking with your little insiders. And if you've ever been in a relationship, first of all, that's one of my favorite parts of like relationships, both romantic and platonic. I love inside jokes. I love shit that maybe the inside joke was created 10 years ago. There's shit that happened in college that to this day, if I bring it up or if I reference it, like we're going to laugh. And I just can't imagine like we got kids and shit and history and shit. Now you back in my house, we doing inside jokes. And she says that Al Green's I'm Still in Love with You comes on during this Christmas Day, like towards the end of the evening while they're opening presents, right? And so she like is listening to the song, she's getting the feels, and she doesn't want to look at Matthew, but she does. And of course, what's he doing? When she looks at him, he's looking at her, and they're like, and she says, I did still love him. She's like, I still loved him, bro. Like, I still loved him. And so, yeah, just know that within 6 months, Matthew had moved into that little ass apartment and they had went and got another house together. Okay? That's all you need to know. She said, I'm still in love with you. But then you're going to see exactly why she would still be in love with Matthew. So up until this point, this high school that they're going to, again, I think the way that both Matthew and Miss Tina treat Kelly says a lot about their character. Like, these are good people at the end of the day. Right. Miss Tina, stand up. Stand up. Kelly had a teacher at this school who really wanted to humble her because remember, Girls Time, the dolls, they're getting like, it's a slow grind, but they are becoming very well known in Houston. And so her teacher knew this. And so he always would give Kelly a hard time about it for whatever reason. He was always trying to humble her. She had got like, I don't know if the grade was bad, but it wasn't like, I think she got like a C. I would think though, Miss Tan didn't say the exact grade, but I would think it would probably be around a C because she didn't fail it, but it wasn't like a great grade. And the teacher told her in front of everyone that maybe if you spent less time singing, you would do better on the test. And so he was very vocally like kind of disrespectful to her. And this was something that Miss Tina, that they knew about. So At the end of this chapter, we find out that they get signed to Columbia. Like this, and this is it. This is what Matthew's been going for, right? And so Miss Tina wants to wait till the end of the day to tell the girls about getting signed. And Matthew's like, fuck that! I'm telling them right now. And what is the first thing he do before he even do anything else? He goes up to Kelly's school. He walks into the classroom. Mind you, that you have to think how calculated this is, because he walks into the classroom while Kelly is in there, makes a big fuss in front of the class that she just got signed to Columbia, and tells the teacher that maybe you need to go back to fucking school. You know what I'm saying? Like he went in there and stood up for Kelly and then said, come on, Kelly, we're getting the fuck out of here. And it's like, you be hearing these type of stories and it's like, this is why she was with him, bro. This is why the fuck she was with him, bro. This is why she was with him. Because he was doing shit like this. Like, he was not, like, Matthew kept his foot on motherfuckers' necks, bro. It's so funny. So yeah, that's how this chapter ends. Now, mind you, Matthew was working this whole time on getting them signed to Columbia. That's the other part of this. Matthew was diligent. So not only did he get them like signed, he was like very big on I'm at an hour and a half. Oh my God. I really want to do chapter 29, but I don't want this to be over an hour and a half. But I just want you to know that you are going to continue to see examples as to why Miss Tina why it took her 30 years to leave this man. Because I'm like, the fact that Kelly was calling him dad, that he was showing up for Kelly in this way, he was showing up for his daughters in this way, he was still showing up for Miss Tina in this way. He just was constantly fucking other bitches and spending too much money. He was just fucking women and spending too much money, which is a lot combined, you know? It's a lot. But I definitely feel like, yeah, this book is so good. If you haven't read it, I feel like, are we on a schedule? Yes, we are. Today is Friday. I probably will go live again tomorrow. It's on my heart. I really want to finish this book by next week. So yeah, we'll probably do this again tomorrow. Check my main page and check this page. And if you didn't see the whole thing, sorry y'all. I know I said I was going to go to chapter 30. We stopped at, was that chapter 27 or 28? But I'll get to them tomorrow and I'll have added some more chapters. If you want to watch it on the YouTube channel, I'm going to upload it right now. Bye to the YouTube.